This is the topic we shall discuss today. Okay. But for that we have to know what does the term constitution mean. For every country we know that there is a constitution, isn't it? It may be a democratic country or non-democratic country, whatever it is, the constitution is a must. The administration of the country should run according to the constitution, isn't it? So instead of defining in a large manner, let us divide it in certain segments, so it will be easier for you to understand what does the term constitution mean. So see, I have written certain features of the constitution. It will be easier for you to understand what does the term constitution mean in general sense. First I have written a set of rules. Yes, no doubt. The constitution is a set of rules. Those rules may be written or unwritten. Why I am talking that the rules can be written or unwritten? See, there is an example. Say for example, the Constitution of England, Great Britain we say, it is, though there is a written constitution for England, but the administrative policies basically run by following the customs, rituals, certain systems and all, okay, the social customs, okay, the political structure is like that. They follow the norms basically instead of following the written constitution. So written constitution gets less importance in England, okay. So similarly there are other countries where there is written constitution, and for our country if we say yes, of course we have got a written constitution, but there are certain aspects or certain features which are unwritten also. That's why I am telling a constitution can be written or unwritten, okay. And of course it is a set of rules. Which rules? The rules by which the administration runs, okay. The government of a country runs the country according to the rules set in the constitution. So these are the features. Then I have written here, assured by the government. What does it mean? Assured by the government. Yes, this is also important feature of a constitution in general. Okay, everywhere the constitution is assured by the government. Means whatever articles are written, whatever rules are given there, these are exactly assured by the government. Okay, the government's guarantees there that yes, these articles are assured by the government. Then there is uniformly applicable. What does it mean, uniformly applicable? Uniformly applicable means whoever in the country, he may belong to a high class in the society or may belong to a lower class, okay, or a governmental position, he may hold a high position in the society or in the administrative matters, wherever it is, or economically sound, okay, or poor, whoever it is uniformly applicable. The articles of the constitution are uniformly applicable for all and each and every one in the society. So this is also an important feature of the constitution. Then I have written punishable if not followed. That is very important thing. It is said that constitution maintains the highest position in a country, isn't it? Constitution is the highest. That is called the supremacy of the law, supremacy of the constitution. In a country, none is above the constitution. The administrative policies, whatever it is, the system continues according to the constitution. So we can say that there is supremacy of law. The constitution places at the highest position in a country. So these, if we accumulate all these features, we get the definition of the constitution. So how can we define the constitution? Yes, we must say a constitution is a set of rules which may be written or unwritten, and of course it is assured by the government, and which is uniformly applicable for all in the country, and if not followed, these are punishable. If I am not following the articles of the constitution, I am committing a crime. Got the point? So these are the features of a constitution. Everything, this all together makes it a constitution. Now let us come to our country. Okay, for the formation of the Indian constitution, long back in the year 1934, this is a very important year we have to remember. In the year 1934, Indian National Congress, the first formed political party we can say, in the year 1934, Indian National Congress has demanded for the formation of the Constituent Assembly. Now what is this Constituent Assembly? We should know in detail. Actually, sometimes this question is asked, who has written the Indian Constitution? So frequently the students answer that Dr. B.R. Ambedkar has written the Indian Constitution. But the answer is partially true. Why I am telling it is partially true? Because for a single person it is impossible to write such a vast constitution, because we know that the Indian Constitution is the lengthiest constitution, the largest constitution and most complicated constitution in the world. So it was quite impossible for a single person to write such a vast constitution. That's why it is better to say the drafting committee of the Constituent Assembly has written the Indian Constitution. That will be a better answer. Okay. Now, as we are talking about the INC's demand, that is Indian National Congress, much before the independence, you see, in the year 1934, itself, Indian National Congress has demanded for the formation of the Constituent Assembly. Now, why so early the demand was made? Because it was felt that, yes, of course, the country is going to get the independence. Now, when a country gets independence, of course, it will be run by the representative of the same country, isn't it? The people will elect their representatives. Now those selected members will run the administration. Now if there is not certain particular rules, laws and all these things, then how the country will run? So of course a constitution is needed, where all those rules, regulation, norms will be written by which the administration will run. Now who will write that constitution? Of course it will be written by a committee, by an organization where there will be representation from every section of the society. Okay, so the people, the representative must be selected by the people around the country, from every community. You know that our country is of a diverse nature, isn't it? There are many communities, then there is social divisions, there is caste division, there is various religions. Okay, so many divisions are there, lot of diversities are there, and all these diversities actually make our country so beautiful. Okay, so if there is no representation from each and every community, then it doesn't make a perfect body which will write the constitution. That's why the demand was made in the year 1934, much ahead of the independence, by Indian National Congress for the formation of Constituent Assembly. Now in the year 1946, election was held. Okay, in 1946 election was held for what? For the members of the Constituent Assembly, those who will be the member of the Constituent Assembly, and they will have the most sensitive responsibility, great responsibility of writing the constitution for the country. Got the point, I hope, isn't it? So in the year 1946 the election held for the members, for choosing the members of the Constituent Assembly, and they were chosen. Now the giant task was started. Now these members, the elected members, have collected the constitutions around the country, okay, around the world, from various countries. Constitutions were being collected and those were studied for a long period of time. Actually, if we say there were 299 members earlier, actually there is a confusion regarding this number, but still we can say this number 299, we can accept it. Okay, so these many members, they have collected the constitutions around the world, okay, from various countries of the world. They have collected the constitutions and accepted the best ideals, the concepts from the constitutions, okay, from various countries. Now that's why, as I told you, that the Indian Constitution is the largest and the most complicated constitution. That is the basic reason that all the basic ideologies, the concepts, okay, were taken from various countries' constitutions. That's why it became the largest, most lengthiest and complicated constitution. Now those members, 299 members of the Constituent Assembly, sat together actually from 1946 to 1949, around 3 years time. From 1946 to 1949, in these 3 years, 114 days, almost 114 days they sat together to write the constitution, for drafting the constitution. There was a smaller body within the Constituent Assembly, we call it the drafting committee, those who have actually done the work, okay, that is the drafting committee, and it was headed by, chairperson of this drafting committee was Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. As some people say that the Indian Constitution is written by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, but this is partially true, because the Indian Constitution was written by the drafting committee of the Constituent Assembly, which was headed by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. That should be the correct answer. Okay. So from 1946 to 1949, spread over 3 years, around 114 days, these many members sat together, discussed and drafted the Indian Constitution, and ultimately the result was out. So what was the result? The result was the lengthiest constitution, the most complicated constitution of the world, that is called the Indian Constitution. Okay. Now this Sangvidhi, it is called Sangvidhi. Okay. So 1946 to 1949. Now the time has come to accept the constitution. Now we have to remember here two dates, two important dates are there. That is, in the year 1949, 26th November. Okay, 26th November 1949 is a very important date. We have to remember 26th November 1949. Our constitution was adopted by the Constituent Assembly. Okay, it was adopted by the Constituent Assembly. Constituent Assembly. Okay, most of the time these two dates are confused, because you have to remember that officially acceptation is one thing and came into being or came into force is something else. So on 26th November 1949, the Constituent Assembly officially accepted the Indian Constitution, but actually it came into being, means the Indian Constitution was came into force on 26th, okay, came into force, we should say, came into effect, we can say, came into effect or came into force when? On 26th January 1950. Okay, so these two dates are important, as I told you earlier. Okay, on 26th November 1949, the Constitution was officially accepted by the Constituent Assembly. Okay, the body which has written the Constitution. Okay, actually the drafting committee has written the Constitution. So the actual body, the Constituent Assembly, has accepted the Constitution on 26th November 1949, and it came into effect or came into force, you can say. What does it mean, came into effect? Means the Indian administration, the government of India started running the administration of India from 26th January 1950 on the basis of Constitution. Means according to the Constitution, Indian administration started running from 26th January 1950. So these two dates, please don't get confused, when it was adopted and when it came into effect. Two dates are very important here. Now the thing is that this is also one reason that why we celebrate 26th January as Republic Day, isn't it? So that is the situation, how the Constituent Assembly was formed. Okay, now we shall see some eminent members of this Constituent Assembly. Who are the eminent members of this Constituent Assembly? Question may be asked. Okay, so there were temporary chairman Sachidananda Sinha. You must remember these names, certain important information. Okay, for your short questions from this chapter. Okay, some short questions from this chapter are very important. Say for example, who was the temporary chairman of this of the Constituent Assembly? The answer will be Sachidananda Sinha. Okay, the Sachidananda Sinha. Sachidananda Sinha was the temporary chairman we should say, of the Constituent Assembly. Okay, he was the temporary chairman of the Constituent Assembly. Then some other eminent members were there. Okay, then who was the president? Who was the president of the Constituent Assembly? The president of the Constituent Assembly was Dr. Rajendra Prasad. Rajendra Prasad was the president of the Constituent Assembly. Then some other eminent members were there. The names are very important. Say for example, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, Shyama Prasad Mukherjee, okay, then B.N. Rao, then Jawaharlal Nehru. So they were some important members of the Constituent Assembly. So these eminent personalities were there in that body which has written the Constitution. So that way the Constituent Assembly was formed, and ultimately the result came out, and the result was the lengthiest constitution of the world. That is our Constitution. We can feel proud of this Constitution, okay, because it is one of the most important constitution, most valuable constitution in the world. Okay. Now we shall see what does this constitution need? Why do we need the constitution? That is the title of the chapter. Okay, why does a country need the constitution? Okay, so there are certain necessities for which the constitution is needed for every country. Okay, let us see what are the necessities served by a constitution. Okay, so first of all, number one, we should say set certain ideals. Okay, set certain ideals. What does it mean, set certain ideals? Means the way the administration is running in a country, those are decided by the constitution. Those are already written in the constitution, according to which the administration is running by the government. Okay, that is called setting the ideals. Okay, then decides the nature of the country. Nature of the country. Nature of the country is decided by the constitution. Say for example, if we take the nature of our country, okay, what type of country India is? Actually, in the very first page of the Indian constitution, that is the preamble of the constitution, certain words are there. Those words are enough to explain what type of country we are living in. Okay, so what are those important words? Let us see. Those words are how this what are this nature of the country? Let us see. For an example, our country's example we are taking. So in the constitution it is written that the India is sovereign, then secular, then democratic, republic, country. Okay, sovereign, secular, democratic, republic, country. Okay, now what are these features mean? See, each and every word is very important here. We are talking about that a constitution decides the nature of a country. How it decides? Say for example, our country. Our country's nature is decided by the certain words which are written in the preamble itself. The first page of the constitution, Indian constitution, is called the preamble, isn't it? So like in American constitution there is preamble, so similarly in our constitution also there is preamble, and certain words define the nature of our country. So what are these words? These words are sovereign, secular, then socialist, another word is there of course, socialist, democratic, republic. Let us take one by one. First we are talking about sovereign. We call India as a sovereign country. What does it mean? What does the term sovereignty mean? Actually there are two types of sovereignty. One is called internal sovereignty and the other is called external sovereignty. Internal sovereignty means the way the government runs the administration, no other third party, no individual, no other organization can interfere here. That is the meaning of internal sovereignty. Means regarding the running of the administration, nobody has to say nothing. Okay. So that is the matter of internal sovereignty. Then what is external sovereignty? That matter comes when you talk about the international relationship. Say for example, what type of relationship India will maintain with, say for example, Japan. The international relationship with India and Japan should be decided by India and Japan only, not by any third country, say for example America and all. Okay. In simple words we can say the external sovereignty means setting the foreign policy by the country itself. That is the meaning of external sovereignty. Okay. So we have got the meaning of sovereign. Why we call India as a sovereign country? Then we are talking about secular. India is a secular country, isn't it? In the later chapters we will get in detail. In short, I want to tell that there is no state religion. The government of India doesn't support any particular religion. At the same time, the government has no right to seize anyone's religious freedom. That is called the secularism. Okay, that's why it is called that India is a secular country. Another feature of secularism is that every individual has got the right to explain his or her religion in a different way. Okay, it is not necessarily that the traditional way as the religion is being explained, he has to accept it. He can explain in his own way, of course by maintaining modesty. So that is the feature of secularism. As I told you in the later chapters, the chapter's title is there, secularism, so we shall discuss detail there. But in short, as I said that secularism means there is no state religion and the government has no right to seize anybody's religious freedom. Then we call India as a democratic country. I think all of you know about this. Why we call India a democratic country? Okay, for around 200 years, the people of our country were enslaved by the foreign rulers. So they really know what does the term democracy mean, isn't it? So people elect their representatives, okay, by means of universal adult franchise. And we can feel proud in one way. You see, we are the first country where all the people of 21 years and above got the right to vote from the very beginning, from the very first election. But some countries, say for example USA and some other countries were there, those who did not provide the voting right to all the people. Even women did not get get the voting right in some countries from the very first election. That's why you can feel proud that from our very first election, from the year 1950 onwards, we are having the first general election. So from then onwards, each and every member of the society, may be male or female, may belong to any religion, got the right to vote. That is called truly universal adult franchise. So we can feel proud that yes, truly India is a democratic country. Then comes socialist country. We call India a socialist country. What does it mean? What is the meaning of socialism? We have to go back to that situation when India got the independence. It was not that situation that at a fine mood, in a nice environment we got the independence. Not at all. That was a turmoil situation. In the next class, in class 9, we will study in detail about this. In short, let me tell you, because there was the problem of partition. Millions of people were being transformed from one place to the other. Got the point? So that was the reason that why we say India is a socialist country, means the government has to take the sole responsibility for distribution and production and distribution of the wealth. Got the point? That's why we call it a socialist country. And our nation builders could not leave this matter in the hands of the privatization. Okay, some private authorities, private enterprises could not handle the matter. Okay, because millions of people were living under the poverty line. Then how come the government could leave the matter on some private hands? That's why the majority's decision was that yes, the country must be a socialist one. Then comes republic. Why we say India is a republic country? As we know, we celebrate the Republic Day when? If I would have asked this question in the class, all would have shouted, isn't it? Sir, we celebrate on 26th January, the Republic Day. So why we call India a republic country? Because the highest executive is directly elected by the people. It is not a hereditary post. The highest executive is not at all a hereditary post in our country. That's why we can say India is truly a republic country. Now see, by these words, the constitution set the nature of the country. Got the point? So these are the necessities of a constitution. Okay. Now another aspect is there. We should say that to save us from ourselves. Okay. What does it mean to save? The constitution saves us from ourselves. Okay, isn't it funny something? Isn't it? So actually we may do something like that. Say those who are the majority number of seat holders in the central legislature, in their favor they may pass certain laws which will only help a certain sections of the society, but which may not be helpful for the majority sections of the society or any particular section of the society. Are you getting the point clear? It may happen that by means of majority, a particular section of the society can get passed certain laws, articles and on. So in that sense, we may get the benefit, the majority may get the benefit, but a certain section of the society may be harmed, okay, may fall in trouble. So it is not possible to do so, and the constitution prohibits such matters. That is called the guiding and controlling the administration. In this manner, the constitution guides and controls the administration. Hope you got the point. Okay, then we shall see the basic features of the Indian Constitution here. Okay, we shall see the basic features of the Indian Constitution. Okay, what are these basic features of the Indian Constitution? Let us see. Actually, as we said, Indian Constitution is the world's largest and most complicated constitution. That becomes the first feature of the Indian Constitution. Okay, world's largest and most complicated. World's largest and most complicated constitution. Why do we say? See, earlier we have discussed the Constituent Assembly, the members of the Constituent Assembly had collected various countries' constitutions, and they have accepted, they have accumulated some important ideals, norms, features from those constitutions. So naturally, when one constitution is a book, isn't it? So when one book is written by consulting various other books and many good ideals are being taken from those books, then definitely it is going to be the most lengthiest, bulkiest constitution and even the most complicated constitution. So that becomes the first feature of the Indian Constitution. So second feature, let us see the second feature of the Indian Constitution. What is that? Admixture of flexibility and rigidity. Why we call Indian Constitution as the admixture of flexibility and rigidity? Yes, there are certain parts of our Constitution which can be easily amendable. You know the meaning of amendment of the Constitution? I hope you heard, isn't it? Amendment is nothing but changing of the Constitution. In short, in simple words we can say, amendment means changing of the Indian Constitution, changing of the Constitution. Okay, so now there are certain parts of the Indian Constitution which are flexible, means just by the means of simple majority the Constitution can be changed. Okay, say for example, if there are 100 members, so the simple majority comes with the 51 members, isn't it? So those 51 members are enough to amend certain parts of the Constitution. That makes the Indian Constitution flexible. Okay, flexible means easily amendable, easily changeable. Then, but some other parts are there in the Constitution which is not possible to be amended by the simple majority. Then how those parts can be changed? Yes, those also can be amended, but there 2/3 majority is required. Those will be present and voting over there in the central legislature. Got the point? So certain parts of the Indian Constitution are very, very rigid. Now, which are these parts? Which are these parts of the Constitution which are rigid? Those are the basic structure of the Constitution. As I said earlier, certain words, sovereign, democratic, republic, all those words make the basic structure of the Constitution, and those parts cannot be easily amended, and that makes the Indian Constitution a rigid Constitution. So isn't it a mixture of flexibility and rigidity? Okay, the third important feature of the Indian Constitution we shall see here, that is the separation of power. Separation of power. Okay, what type of separation of power is maintained by the Indian Constitution? We know that there are 3 organs of the government. All of you know. What are these 3 organs? These are the legislature, executive and the judiciary, isn't it? So every organ has got certain important responsibilities. Say for example, what is the responsibility of the legislature? Of course, the first comes the making laws. In our later chapters, we shall discuss about this. Okay, so legislature, its most important task is to make laws and controlling the government. Okay, so like this. So the legislative body frames laws for the nation. Now the executive body, there are 2 types of executive. One is called political executive, the other is called non-political executive. Those who are elected by the people, they are called the political executive, and those who are appointed by the government official, they are called non-political executive. So, by the combination of political and non-political executives, the administration runs. Okay, according to the rules, laws made by the legislative body. And what is the function of the third body? That is the judiciary. Yes, of course, if I commit any kind of crime, judiciary is there to punish me, isn't it? So, legislative, executive and judiciary, these three organs of the government must function smoothly, independently, most importantly, independently they must function so that the administration can run smoothly in overall manner. So, who looks after this matter? Yes, all the provisions are written in the constitution that three organs of the government must function independently, and that is the meaning of separation of power. But there is a condition in our constitution that we do not follow strict separation of power like the constitution of USA. Okay, the constitution of USA, they follow the strict separation of power regarding this, the activities of these three organs. Okay, but in our constitution we find a nice combination. Okay, means of course separation of power is there, but there is a good combination, good collaboration among these three organs, because our nation builders felt if there is not any combination, no proper combination among these organs, then it is impossible for the administration to run smoothly. That's why the separation of power is there, but it is a bit flexible type. That is also necessary for smooth conduction of the business. Okay. Then the other feature we shall see. What are the other features? Of course, the inclusion of the fundamental rights. One of the most important part of our Indian constitution, that is fundamental rights. Fundamental rights. Okay. Why these are rights called fundamental? Basic. We are born with these rights. We cannot survive without these rights. That's why these are called fundamental, basic rights. Okay, each and every individual has got these rights. Of course, the citizens, not the aliens, those who are coming from outside in our country. Okay, of course, the citizens of our country will enjoy the fundamental rights. Now, what are these fundamental rights? There are certain explanation, detailed explanation is there, which beautify our Indian constitution. Okay, so what are these main fundamental rights we shall see? The first comes the right to equality. Okay, right to equality. Right to equality comes first among the fundamental rights. Article number 14 to 18. Okay, we must remember this. These article numbers are very important for you. Short type of questions can be asked. Okay, so in between I am talking about the questions also. So it will be better if you sit with your copy and paper so that you can write down this. It will be helpful for your preparation of your examination also. Okay, so the first comes the right to equality. Article number bearing article number 14 to 18. What does it mean, right to equality? On the basis of caste or creed or gender or religion, no discrimination can be made either by the government or any individual or any organization. No discrimination is possible. If it is made, it is punishable offense. So that is the right to equality. We must remember the article numbers 14 to 18. Then second comes right to freedom. Right to freedom. The second fundamental right, article number from 19 to 22. Okay, as I am telling you repeatedly, please remember the article numbers. Short questions can be asked on this. So, right to freedom. What type of freedom we are talking about? It is of course a fundamental right, right to freedom, no doubt. But what type of freedom we are talking about? We are talking about the freedom of expression. For example, you may not like certain governmental activities. So, you have the right to protest against those activities. How will you protest? Yes, of course, you can protest through media, through print media, through electronic media. Okay, so your opinion can be expressed. Okay, that is the first among the right to freedom. Then freedom of movement is there. Freedom of movement, you can move anywhere freely, but of course there are certain restrictions. It doesn't mean that you can move anywhere, everywhere. You cannot enter into the parliament. Okay, so there are certain restrictions are there. Of course, fundamental rights we will enjoy, no doubt, but certain restrictions are there for the security of the nation, isn't it? So, right to freedom beautifies our Indian constitution. Okay, then next comes right against exploitation. Right against exploitation. Article number 23 and 24. Article number 23 and 24. Right against exploitation. What type of exploitation we are talking about? Specifically, it is mentioned here that any boy or girl under 14 years cannot be engaged in any kind of hazardous activities, in industrial activities, or where there is risk and all. Understood? So, can you recall one similar article, that is right to education, that up to the age of 14 each and every child has got the means right to education. Okay, right to education is provided by the Indian government up to the age of 14, means free education. The government, they can study in the government school free of cost up to the age of 14. So, we are actually talking about here right against exploitation. So, as I said, no child below 14 years can be engaged in any kind of hazardous activities, risky, where there is life risk. Okay, there may be some accident, they may commit accident. So, such kind of activities are prohibited for those children up to 14 years. Especially that is mentioned here, right against exploitation. Okay, then there is another fundamental right which is called right to freedom of religion. Okay, it is one of the most important fundamental right to freedom of religion. Right to freedom of religion, article number 25 to 28. Okay, as I told in the preamble itself, that particular word, I hope you remember, secular, isn't it? That single word is enough to explain what this right to freedom of religion mean. We said that there is no state religion. There are some other countries around the world who are having their state religion. A particular religion is promoted, propagated by the authority, by the government, but our Indian government is not that. Okay, not like that. Got the point? So, there is no state religion for our country. At the same time, the authority, the government has no right to seize anybody's right to freedom, right to religion. Got the point? So, that is the right of religion. And another important thing of this right to religion is that every individual has got the power to explain in his own way. Okay, you see, traditionally some religious explanations are there in various books, various mythological books are there, religious scripts are there. So, every individual has got the right to explain in his own way. Got the point? So, that is the right to freedom of religion, which are explained in article number 25 to 28. Then there is cultural and educational rights. Okay, this is another cultural and educational rights. Okay, cultural and educational rights, article number 29 and 30. Article number 29 and 30 explain cultural and educational rights. We know that our land is a land of diversity, isn't it? Lot many cultures, religion, okay, various types of customs are there. So, these matters are assured by article number 29 and 30. Okay, so cultural and educational rights are assured by article number 29 and 30. So, these articles assure that every community, every religious group has got the right to express their opinion, express their rituals, customs and all. Okay, they can continue with their rituals, customs and all. Okay, so this is very important, cultural and educational rights. Okay, it also includes certain matters. Say for example, every religious group has given the right to expand their educational institutions. Got the point? Every religious group has got the power to expand their religious institutions. Okay, means religious institutions. Okay, they can establish temples or mosques or churches and all. They can establish. At the same time, you have seen the religious groups have the right to propagate to establish their educational institutions also. Okay, so that makes the cultural and educational right bearing the article number 29 and 30. Okay, we are coming to the last part of this fundamental right, that is article number 32 to 35. Okay, right to constitutional remedies, very important, that is article number 32 to 35. Now you may wonder that I told that cultural and educational rights 29 and 30 and right to constitutional remedies 32 to 35. Then what about 31, article number 31? Where is article number 31? Actually article number 31 has been removed from our constitution because right to property is no more a fundamental right. Okay, right to property is no more a fundamental right, but there are certain provisions are there. Say for example, for any public usefulness, if anybody's property is being taken by the government, then the sound sum is to be handed over to that person. Got the point? Means the person is given the sound amount when they access their private property. Okay, when the governmental authority access any private property for the benefit of public welfare, then they have to pay for it. Okay, so that is different thing. Now let us talk about right to constitutional remedies. See, this is the last among the fundamental rights, but according to me, it is the most important fundamental right. Why? Because if this right is not assured, then the other rights are not assured. How? We are talking about it is as the right to constitutional remedies. Why are we calling it right to constitutional remedies? Right to constitutional remedies means if any of the rights are violated. Yes, anybody on the line? Hello?
Hello?
Yes, who is speaking?
Rajbir Bhattacharya.
Yes, you are always asking the question. Rajbir, very good. Tell, what is your question?
আমার প্রশ্ন হলো আমাদের জাতীয়তাবাদী আন্দোলন কেন সার্বিক প্রাপ্তবয়স্ক ভোটাধিকারের নীতি সমর্থন করেছিল?
Actually, very good question you have asked. Nice question.
আর স্যার,
Yes.
সামনের ক্লাসটাকে আপনি যদি ইংলিশটা বুঝিয়ে দেন তাহলে একবারে বাংলাটা বুঝে দেন, আমি তো ইংলিশটা বুঝি না তাই।
No, actually there will be simultaneous classes. Okay, there will be classes in Bengali version also. Okay, and there will be bilingual classes. There will be classes for English medium school, Rajbir. So I don't think you will face any trouble. And this chapter we have already discussed in Bengali. But still, as we have asked the question, let me answer your question. You said that why our nationalist movement, the leaders, has accepted the universal adult franchise for our country, because they have realized that after being dominated by for around 200 years, our country people have suffered a lot under the British government, isn't it? Various ways, either by means of physical torturing or mental harassing, various types of, okay, they were being tortured by the foreign rulers. Now, after the independence, they have got the chance to rule by themselves. Okay, now how to rule by ourselves? So that is the system, that choosing our representative, isn't it? That is the meaning of election. What is election? Election is nothing but the selection of the representative, isn't it? Election is nothing but the selection of the representatives in our country. So that's why our nation builders were confirmed enough that yes, our people, the people of our country has realized that what type of executive we want. Okay, who will rule us? Who is going to rule us? Okay, so that will be decided ultimately by the people of the country. Got the point? So that's why our nation builders, the rulers, have decided that universal adult franchise is a must for our country. Okay, as I was discussing about the right to constitutional remedies, it means that the above rights, the other rights, say right to freedom, right to equality, or educational, cultural rights, whatever it is, any fundamental right is being violated, then you can go to the court. If anybody's fundamental right is violated, then the person can go to the court. Now, who can violate my rights? Say for example, as I am an Indian, my rights can be violated. Now, who can violate my rights, my fundamental rights? It may be by another individual, isn't it? one person can violate the right of other person, isn't it? Now an organization can violate one individual's right. Even the government can violate one individual's right. So in any case, in every case, the individual has got the right to access the facility of the judiciary. Means if your fundamental rights are being violated, you can go to the court, you can access, you can get back your right. That is called the right to constitutional remedies, okay, bearing article number 32 to 35. Okay, so these all matter, these all the fundamental rights has beautified our Indian constitution. So these are the matters we should discuss today, and some other features also are coming here. Let's see. It is called the federal structure. Another very, very important feature of the Indian constitution is federal structure of the government. Okay, the federal structure of the government. What does it mean? Federal structure of the government. We call India a federal country. Why we call India a federal country? Yes, someone is there on the line. Hello.
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 Sir?
Yes.
Sir, I have one doubt.
May I know your name, please? Who is asking the question?
Sir, I am Jewel.
Joel. Okay. From which school you are?
Sir, commercial.
Acha, okay. What is your question?
Sir, I want to know that who framed the Indian Constitution?
Okay. One of the simplest question you asked. Very good. But let me clear the doubt. Sometimes it's a common question, very common question. Who wrote the Indian Constitution? Frequently, the students answer that Dr. B.R. Ambedkar has written the Constitution. But in the beginning of this discussion, I told that it was quite impossible for a single individual to write the Constitution, which is the world's largest constitution, isn't it? So if it is asked, who has framed the Indian Constitution, answer should be this way, that the drafting committee of the Constituent Assembly headed by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar has composed the Indian Constitution. That should be the most suitable answer, instead of telling only the name of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. Yes, of course, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar is the father of the Indian Constitution, no doubt. But actually it was impossible for a single individual to write such a vast constitution, the world's most complicated, lengthiest constitution. Okay, that's why it is said that the drafting committee, one smaller body within the Constituent Assembly headed by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, has composed the Indian Constitution. Okay, so you should answer in that manner. We are discussing about another important feature of the Indian Constitution, that is federal structure of the government. We call India a federal country. It is very simple to understand that why we call India a federal country. It is because there are basically two levels of government. Okay, when there is two levels of government, we call it a federal country. Okay, so what are these two levels? Say for example, there is central level of government. Okay, yes, someone is on the line. Hello.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
I am Dr.
Yes, Dr. Shi, what is your question?
Sir, we are in such a small class, so what is the need to know about the constitution in this class?
Oh, wow, very good. Okay, actually this is set by NCERT. The CBSE has accepted this. How you think that you are in such a small class? No, you are grown up enough. Okay, a boy or a girl of class 8 is grown up enough to know about the Indian Constitution. Okay, the basic system of administration, the basic structure of our system of the Constitution, every citizen of our country should know. So you don't think that you are too small, that you need not to know about the Constitution of our country. Okay, because Constitution sets certain rules, regulations, norms for our country, isn't it? So if we don't know how the administration is running, at least in the simplest manner, in upper classes you will know in detail, but in class 8, this much we have to know. Each and every child should know how the administration is running. What is the basic feature of the Indian Constitution? Okay, so it is not at all useless to know about the Indian Constitution. Okay, very good. Now we are discussing about the federal structure. As I said, basically there are two levels of government in our country, isn't it? What are these two levels? These two levels are the central government. Say for example, in our country, at New Delhi there is central government for running the overall administration around the country, and in every state there is state government. So these two levels makes the country a federal. Okay, that's why it is called a federal country. Again, there are local government at the local level also. You know about, you have studied in class 6 itself, there is rural local self-government, there is urban local self-government. So all these divisions, okay, not by a single government the country is running. Okay, so there are various levels, say for example the central government at New Delhi, then every state there is state government, then there are other grassroots level, that is called the rural level, the Gram Panchayat, Panchayati Raj system is there. Okay, then in urban areas there is municipal corporation, municipality, Nagar Panchayat, all these levels are there. So all these levels make India a federal country. I hope the point is clear, isn't it? So this is also a very important feature of our Indian constitution. Okay, there are some other important features here. Say for example, inclusion of fundamental duties. Okay, inclusion of fundamental duties. Okay, inclusion of fundamental duties in our constitution. It is not that we will just enjoy the rights, okay, as we have discussed earlier, the fundamental rights, and we need not to perform any of our duties. No, not at all. Okay, in the later part, that is in the through certain amendments, fundamental duties, around 10 fundamental duties are included in the Indian constitution. Say for example, every citizen of the country must respect the national symbols, the national flag, national anthem, and all these things. So there are certain, all these fundamental duties are there which are incorporated in our constitution. These also makes the constitution a beautiful one, a balanced one, not just enjoying the rights, of course performing certain duties also. Okay, so that makes the Indian constitution a beautiful one. Okay, then there is judicial supremacy, another important feature. Okay, judicial supremacy. Judicial supremacy is another important feature of the Indian constitution. See, when we say any government has got three organs, that is legislative, executive and judiciary, normally we keep it in the third position. We keep the judiciary at the third position, isn't it? Legislature comes first. The people's representatives sit over there in the legislature. Either it may be the central legislature or state legislature, wherever it is. So the people's representative comes first here. Then the executive body, as I said earlier, the political executive, the non-political executive, all together run the administration of the country, isn't it? And judiciary we put in the third position. But we have to remember that though it is in the third position, but it is the most important organ of the government. Because if any member of the legislative body or from the executive body commits any kind of crime, then who is there to look after the matter? Of course the judiciary, isn't it? So the other two organs are also controlled by the judiciary. That is called the judicial supremacy. And in our country, the highest court, the apex court, it is called the apex appellate court. Okay, the highest appeal court of appeal is the Supreme Court, isn't it? So, and this system is also called the integrated judiciary system. Okay, under this judicial supremacy, this matter is also included that in our country there is integrated judicial system. Means starting from the grassroots level, that is the Nyaya Panchayat, up to the Supreme Court. Okay, there is Nyaya Panchayat, then there is subdivisional magistrate court, then there is High Court in every state, then in the highest position there is Supreme Court. So all these courts are integrated, means the decisions taken by the lower courts should be given much importance by the higher courts also. It is not that when anybody appeals for the recovery from his problems and all in the means upper courts, so it is not that the decisions taken by the lower courts are overlooked, not at all like that. Okay, so this is called the integrated judiciary system. So that is also one important feature of the Indian constitution. Okay, another important feature is there, we should discuss that, the mixture of unitary system and federal system. Earlier we have discussed India is a federal country, isn't it? So including with that federal system, there is the mixture of unitary system also. Actually, in the Indian Constitution, there is the provision of the mixture of unitary system as well as the federal system. Federal system we have already discussed, that is where there is various levels of government, okay, right from the central level till the grassroots level. At the same time, there is unitary system also. When we call it a unitary system, when there is a most powerful one, that is the central government, when the central government is the most powerful one, we call it the unitary system. Got the point? So, in our constitution, there is possibility, there is provision of mixing up the unitary system and the federal system. I hope the point is clear, isn't it? Got the point? So, let us conclude here today. We have discussed how the Constituent Assembly was formed and what is the importance of the constitution. Then we have discussed about the basic features of the Indian Constitution. Okay, I hope the points are clear to you. Okay, if you prepare certain questions from here, say for example, the formation of the Constituent Assembly, okay, how the Constituent Assembly was formed, then who are the important members of the Constituent Assembly, when our Constitution was adopted by the Constituent Assembly, when our Constitution came into force. Remember these two dates, okay, 26th November 1949 is a very important date when our Constitution was adopted by the Constituent Assembly, and okay. So, let us conclude here. I hope these are the points you should remember. Okay, bye all of you. Take care, stay safe.